on the past. In that sense, it offers us an opportunity to start new, necessary conversations, and also it illuminates stories that are yet to be told within our walls. It's also a commentary on all of our other period rooms and what we want to see happening in the future. That period room, furnished with a range of works from the Met collection, from Bamileke beadwork and 19th century American ceramics to contemporary art and design, it foregrounds generations of Black creativity. What's even more important is that this room is based on many collaborations. This whole concept is based on collaborations with contemporary artists, and some of them are also here today at the press conference, and many more will be, of course, at the opening tonight. So I'm extremely excited to have Roberto Lugo here, who worked with us, and I also saw Joe Motorico, and we also had Fabiola Jean-Louis here, hi, and then I think we might even have Ini Archibald here, who I have not seen yet, but thank you and welcome all that you are here. It was great to work together with you on this room, great to have your work be represented here, to have that be part of our whole story narrative, not only of the Afrofuturist Period Room, but also the story narrative of the Met. These are new acquisitions and works that are commissioned specifically for this space. So this space will have, this project will have a lasting impact on the museum's collection, and also how we show it, how we can demonstrate it, how we can demonstrate also a continued commitment to engaging with and also supporting extraordinary artists of our time. I'd like to thank really the great spirits of this project, people who curated this from the beginning, who formed an idea, and out of that idea grew a space. So I'd like to thank Hannah Meekler, who is here with us, the lead curator and designer, and Dr. Michelle Commander, consulting curator and associate director and curator of the Lapidus Center for the Historical Analysis of Transatlantic Slavery at the New York Public Library's Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Without them, we would not have a project. This project would not have happened, and it's really up to them that we have this enormously visually powerful, conceptually powerful, reimaginative idea about how this room could look like at the Met. We want to thank you for all your help and your time. Thank you. This was done in brilliant partnership with the Met's Sarah Lawrence, who is here, the Iris and E. Gerald Cantor curator in charge of the Department of European Sculpture and Decorative Arts, and with Ian Altevier, the Aaron I. Fleischman curator in the Department of Modern Contemporary Art. So together they pushed us, they pushed the boundaries of what a period room can be, and also what collaborative work can bring to fruition, together with artists and other cultural leaders. We are also grateful to Anna Matisse Donner-Verhicki, who is somewhere here, research associate in the Department of European Sculpture and Decorative Arts, has been instrumental in working on this project. So in keeping with this collaborative ethos of Afrofuturist creative practice, the whole curatorial team engaged in numerous creative processes and with partners to infuse the installation and with additional ideas and perspectives. And one has to really mention that this all happened, of course, during COVID, during the pandemic, sometimes in lockdown, and even that kind of created a stronger bond, a stronger collaborative spirit, and a way of exchange, of discourse, of inspiring each other that I think was unprecedented for us, at least here at the Met, and we really benefited from all your voices and your experience in exactly doing that. Of course, also we are especially grateful to our donors who supported this installation. From the very beginning, I have to say at the beginning we didn't really exactly were able to say what exactly it's going to be, but we said it's going to be fantastic and great and major, and that already, and we have this great team, and so we work with artists, and we will have this fantastic Afrofuturist Period Room. So the Hobson Lucas Family Foundation immediately said yes, we'll support it. The Directors Fund at the Met had to support it. The Art Mentor Foundation in Lucerne supported it from Switzerland, and the Terra Foundation for American Art supported this project. So a great array of fantastic supporters for what has now come to fruition. So without further ado, I'd like to now turn it over to Hannah, to Michelle, to Sarah, and to Ian, who will discuss this project together here on our stage. And I want to thank all of you for coming. I couldn't be more excited. This is a really sunny day here at the Met, and we are very happy that this is happening and opening tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome everyone. Again, I'm Ian Altamir, Area and Fleischman Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art, and I'm so thrilled to be on this stage with three amazing women who I've had such a pleasure collaborating with on this project. And I'll ask them some questions about how we got to where we are, but first, I wanted to reiterate our land acknowledgement that we thought was really important to put in the gallery. It joins a number of other land acknowledgements here around the museum, including one that premiered on our facade. And this one we worked on in collaboration with the amazing Joe Baker from New York's Lenape Center. And so, as we remember and honor the community of Seneca Village, we also recognize that its site, as well as that of the Met, lies in Lenape-Hoke, ancestral homeland of Lenape diaspora. Dutch and British settler colonialists began to displace and forcibly migrate to Lenape more than 200 years before the destruction of Seneca Village. Yet we note the historical erasure that connects both communities. We also respectfully acknowledge both the Lenape and Seneca Village descendants, past, present, and future, for their ongoing relationships to the region and their unalterable contributions to the life and rich heritage of this city. And I think that acknowledgement represents so much of our collaborative spirit in this project. And just if you'll indulge me, a few more very brief thanks to two of my amazing department colleagues, Sheena Wagstaff, Leonard A. Lauder Chairman of Modern and Contemporary Art, who allowed me to participate in this project and enthusiastically supported it, and Abraham Thomas, the wonderful Brodsky Curator of Architecture, Design, and Decorative Arts in the department, who was such an important interlocutor on particularly so many of the objects in the room. And lastly, I want to reiterate from all of us, Max's thanks to Anna Matisse, without whom there would be no room, period. Just don't get it. So on that note, welcome, and it's amazing to be at this point here. And I thought I would ask Sarah to talk a little bit about period rooms more generally and how we began to kind of structure thinking about this project.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you for your opening remarks. So when Max Hollein first arrived at the museum, he expressed his interest in having a new type of period room. He recognized that the most modern of our period rooms is a Frank Lloyd Wright living room, and he was curious to think, what would a contemporary period room look like? Now, period rooms is something that I'm particularly interested in, and I'm particularly interested in what I call the conundrum of the period room, that each of our period rooms are carefully researched, scholarly reconstructions, but they are fictions, the bringing together of furnishing, wall paneling, decorative arts objects that were never actually in the same place at the same time. In addition, our period rooms are predominantly white, affluent, Eurocentric cultures that are featured, and with a couple of exceptions, of course, the Damascus Room, the Astor, Chinese Gordon Court. But we felt that this was an opportunity to think about what period rooms could be, that if every period room has a degree of fiction to its experience, perhaps we could start with that fiction and use that as an opportunity to tell stories in our period rooms that are otherwise have been omitted. So the story that we landed on was to think about the Seneca community, which is really just a few hundred yards to the west of this very site where you're standing. And we felt strongly that the Met has an opportunity and responsibility maybe to address that history directly. So we started with our fiction for our period room being, imagine if one of the original residents of the Seneca community continued continued to live in her family home, and over time accrued sufficient material wealth that she was able to extend her period room into a modern living room attached to the historic 19th century kitchen. She's also now acquired works of art that she felt resonates with her sense of self, her history, her culture, and her aspirations. So having landed on this fabulous fiction for the focus of our period room, Ian and I very quickly realized this is not our story to tell. So our first thought was to reach out to Hannah Beadler, the Academy Award-winning production designer for the movie Black Panther, because we all remembered the extraordinary interiors that she created in that movie, and we thought, someone's already done some of this work. I wonder if she would be willing to even speak to us about it. And it turned out that, in fact, she'd been thinking very strongly about similar histories in Detroit, in New Orleans, where she lives, and she really jumped into it with a degree of sophistication and enthusiasm that was so exhilarating for Ian and for myself. And she basically took on the reins of this project, stepping in as our lead curator for this work. Immediately following, we turned to Michelle Commander as our historian, and she will speak more about her work on this project. But it's important for you to understand that this is a project that began in the spring of 2019. So the world is a different place now, and the project has expanded, enriched, improved, but very much responded to the change of moment in which this project has been realized. And we are extremely grateful to the broader Met community, who was very integral to this project. One of the things we did early on, just about a year ago, was we invited the entire Met community to, not just curators, but everyone who works in this building, to participate in a conversation about this project and the process involved, to get their feedback, to get their buy-in, to seek shared commitment of our community before we move forward on this project. It was an absolutely exhilarating experience. We had so many people joining, we could not fit them all in the Zoom chat space. But we learned an enormous amount about that, and it sparked an ongoing conversation that has continued really up to the present moment.
That's amazing. Thanks for reminding us all of that wonderful process. And I'm also reminded of something another dear colleague who's been integral to this project, Suhaili Bautista Carolina, said to us one day. She said, you don't know how many Afrofuturists there are in this building even already, right? And so the idea that the spirit and the creative force of Afrofuturism is an inclusive one, is one that incorporates a kind of panoply of voices. So it's always sort of been our practice. And I wonder, to that end, how you see this project as a whole maybe changing the way we think about exhibitions here in some small part.
I think we're hoping that the process in putting together this period room is a deeply collaborative, non-hierarchic, inclusive discourse from beginning to its end. I think it does provide a model for future iterations, whether it's in a period room or exhibition planning. I'm relatively new to the museum. I've only been here just a couple of years, and it has been such a privilege to work within this institution with these amazing colleagues and their openness to a new mode of curatorial practice. It's been incredibly exciting. Another aspect of period rooms that's being critiqued in this is the very notion of period. So when you have a European, French, 18th century interior, you can talk about the Rococo. And now we'll be quoting a colleague for whom I greatly admire, Sylvia Hartman. She talks about the temporal entanglement of past, present, and future when you're talking about Black history, the ways in which the history of enslavement has such painful resonance today and in our future. So the open plan of that period room, if you've had a chance to visit, I hope you have, there's an open plan from the kitchen into the living room, where there's a passage from the 19th century past into the 20th century and 21st century and 20th century future. It's intended to evoke that temporal fluidity that really is a kind of critique of what a period would be for a period room focused on Black culture.
That's a fantastic segue to turn to Michelle and talk a little bit with her about her deep thinking about all of these histories, time, temporality, and especially flight. And for me, and I think for you, Sarah, Michelle was reading your Afro-Atlantic flight that was so inspirational in thinking about how we might imagine other possibilities for a room at the Met. And to think about a kind of speculative present future that incorporated Black excellence, creativity, innovation, was so exciting. And I was revisiting your wonderful essay that is forthcoming in the Met Bulletin this winter in a special issue devoted to the period room. It will also include, for the very first time, a graphic novella drawn and written by the amazing John Jennings. But Michelle's essay really speaks to all of these wonderful kaleidoscopic aspects of the project, and you quote a poem from Sun Ra as part of the amazing text that you contributed, and I'm just going to read it quickly if that's okay, because I think it brings up some of these questions. Sun Ra wrote, in some far-off place, many light years in space, I'll wait for you. Where human feet have never trod, where human eyes have never seen, I'll build a world of abstract dreams and wait for you. In tomorrow's realm, we'll take the helm of new ships, then like the lash of a whip, we'll start on our way and safely journey to another world, another world, another world's world. And Michelle, I wonder if you might unpack a little bit that amazing two verses for us and speak to how it describes in part your work too, more generally.
Thank you very much for your intro and for your comments, Ian and Sarah, and involving me in this project. I've spoken with several of you this morning about how serendipitous this entire project has been. When Sarah reached out to me initially, she mentioned that Afro-Atlantic Flight, my first book, was inspirational to the project, the early sort of thought about the project. And I believe I was silent for an uncomfortable maybe 3 seconds, when you're on a conversation with someone. And I said, Sarah, this is really interesting that you're contacting me about this, because I'm now in the early stages of writing a new book about other Black settlements and the sort of history of raising Black property for public use or for other kinds of uses. So this project, I've been touched in many instances, especially during install, thinking I'm gonna fall into a corner and just cry because things that I'm very, very passionate about are encapsulated within this space. And so that Sun Ra poem really struck me as a really good example of what it means to use a kind of speculative thought, a speculative epistemology for thinking about the possibilities for life, even under global anti-Blackness. And in Afro-Atlantic Flight, I talk about speculation and flight as ways that enslaved people, African captives, were able to think about a future that was that went against what was prescribed for them for their African slave trade. And so I begin with the slave ships and African captives careening themselves from the slave ship, believing that in physical death they could return spiritually back to their homelands. And so the speculative question of what if really drives this period room, but has also driven people of African descent for so many generations, because it's always about how to comport oneself in that moment and think about the possibilities for the future for themselves and for future generations as well. And I think that the period room really speaks to that. Every angle, every window, I believe, gives you a different kind of perspective and allows you to see how individual artists are thinking about repurposing history, reclaiming history, but also how these various pieces speak to each other in these really outstanding ways.
Fantastic, thank you, Michelle. I wonder too if you could speak a little bit further about some of our collaborations that we did, particularly maybe our convening, and also how we approached some of the text around the show, our interpretive text.
So in October 2020, we had a virtual convening of curators and artists and filmmakers to sort of think about this period room's very generative two-day discussion about the role that Afrofuturism and the kind of speculative vision plays within folks' work or the work that they're interested in presenting to the public. It was just inspirational. And again, as someone who is an academic, I'm now at the Schomburg Center as associate director and curator, but I still feel as if I'm a professor. But it was really nice to be in that space and find my people, the people who are kind of speaking the same language as I attempt to do, at least. So that was a really great treasure kind of conversation. What was your second? I lost it somewhere.
I forget too, but that's, but that's fine. But I think you're speaking to something that's sort of pervaded all of our work on this. Oh, I was thinking about how we approached our interpretive text as well, because I think you really helped us bring a different kind of mode of thinking too about the way in which we, and this was also encouraged by Hannah too, to have us speak in a different way, I think, than we are used to here at the institution.
I would say that our trying to get the narrative voice right was something that we really stressed. We worked really well collaboratively, I will say. So in thinking about how to ensure that the labels were accessible, sort of thinking about the general public as our audience, that perhaps there will be new audiences that come in from the city or from around the world, hopefully, to see this exhibit. We wanted to make sure that the way we wrote it was in a way that had a voice that was knowledgeable, kind of like a griot's tone. Someone who's knowledgeable, who's giving some factoids in there too about certain kinds of history. Of course, all labels are restricted by a word count. So we wanted to speak about each item, but also to ensure that that someone could read a label and that there would be, a fact in there that they could go research later. There's so many histories that are encapsulated in that room, but I think we got it with the griot. I hope we got it with the griot's voice. That is one that makes you feel welcome into the space, but also will lead people to imagine otherwise, and also to do some of the research in the archives that do, and history books that do exist.
Thank you, and I think that's an amazing segue, the griot's voice, to talk to Hannah a little bit about our collaborations, which we can get to, but I also was hoping you might talk a little bit about those first moments when we all got together. And Sarah spoke to this a little bit. I think it was amazing that we came to you because we knew of your excellence and expertise at realizing a kind of Afrofuturist vision of a world. But it was also so incredible, and of course seems natural, that you would also be so interested in these histories, in this kind of continued history of the erasure of communities of color. And that is a place of deep complexity always to come from. But you sort of embraced this in an amazing way, and we had such incredible ongoing conversations. I wondered if you would speak a little bit to that process.
I can't promise I won't forget what you just said. I might go straight out on a limb and get lost out there, but I'm going to try to stick to it. I come from a place where I work in a world of fictions that try to be real, that want to be real, and kind of at one point I'm calling myself a Wakandan architect, like I go there. So I'm the big emotion in the room, and that's how I sort of conduct myself. So when I was approached by the Met, like Sarah said, I was working in Detroit and started really getting involved in their communities there, Black Bottom, Paradise Valley, that were raised and highways were put in. So they approached me with this idea, and it was Sarah who was like, it'd be interesting if it was like a room, like a structure in a room. And I kind of heard that. I think that's the only thing I heard at one point, and I was like, yes. And it was serendipitous that at that moment that I was really sort of getting into that part of the community and my world that I got this phone call. So it also tells you that there's only 6 degrees of separation in emotion, that once it enters the ether in the consciousness, that it will find where it's supposed to land. And we found each other, the 4 of us. And animities. I don't know where you are, animities, but nothing happens without animities. So, and so that, them approaching me about this idea just really sparked so much in me to jump on board with this. And we had a lot of really great, I think in the beginning, in 2019, fanciful, you're right, ideas about, what this wanted to be, and then we hit 2020. And there was a moment where these ideas sort of became really real for me, and a lot of the collaboration at that time was me needing to unload some of the feelings that I was having during that summer. To my fabulous colleagues here. And our course changed. And not by much, but it changed in the tone of how we were going to approach it and what it really wanted to say. So a lot of our collaboration over the 2 years was, talking about the nuances, the different perspectives that wanted to happen, that wanted to be brought into this space. And I forgot a little bit everything he said, but that's really where it came from. And look, we talked about a lot of hard truths, and I think for the last year I've been saying that truth is the most radical thing that we have right now, and the hard truth is a really radical thing. And I was truthful, and it was heard. There's your change. Institution is but brick and mortar. It's the people in it that make it what it is. And I thank you. So I felt that change, and then it just became this need to continue on. And we all worked really, really hard, I think, looking inside of ourselves and looking outside of ourselves and recognizing each other and what we bring to it. I'm certainly not an academic. I'm the loudest one in the room, and I bring big emotion to everything. And I think that the balance between the 4 of us was exactly what this needed. So that's that.
that was wonderful, and was giving me warm and also deep flashbacks to our process in this, and how heartfelt it was, I think, and also how fun it was. And I think we all brought to this process something that I think was already something that we already do, which is communicate, and particularly in our work with all of the artists who are represented in that room, to have these conversations with them, not in a room because it was still all on Zoom, but still to make those connections and listen to them. I think that was amazing. And we were talking just yesterday about some of the serendipities in there, like Jenn Nkiru's amazing video, which seems to just land on every single thing that we've talked about for 2+ years now, right? So I wondered if you might speak a little bit to that process too, and to some of the stuff Fabiola here, and Njideka's wallpaper. There's just amazing, there's just amazing sort of representations of that process.
I mean, you often hear it takes a village, right? It takes a village. Then part of what we were doing here is to think about what the village is. And if you think back 400 years ago, the village was made up of different people who were brought from Africa and enslaved. But what they did was they put them all together who didn't speak the same language. That was part of the communication breakdown and the tradition breakdown. And what we did was we reclaimed that village. So we have voices like Edie and Fabiola and Roberto, Jenn Nkiru, and we built our own village. And we all may speak different languages by the crafts that we do, but it created a space for us to be, to find peace, to thrive, to be vulnerable, to cry, to hold each other's tears. That's what we created. So, you know, bringing in this diasporic sort of village of people, if you will, was necessary to tell the story. Again, I work in fictions that want to be real. And to me, at some point in my life, they are real. So it's only up to us what it is, right? To me, this place is real. This is in my heart. So I think bringing all of these artists, bringing in the artifacts, the collection from the Met, excuse me, the collection from the Met, got a frog in my throat. The collection from the Met and all of these, we created this village that raises us, that creates a new child, a new birth, and that's what we were doing. And so every single thing, nuanced, is supposed to be there. It has its story, it has its place. Jenn's work, who I've known Jenn for some time in the film world. We both worked on Black is King with Beyonce, and you know, we've been in conversation in other arenas, and that her piece, you know, through the convening, through all the collaboration and conversations that we have, mirrored back the things that we were feeling and saying, told us in a visual that was moving, as does this room moves. The wind through a shotgun house, right? I'm from New Orleans, so you knew I had to bring that up. Always shouting out my city. And, you know, that's what I feel while I'm inside of it. Again, I'm the big emotion in the room. So to me, art is a matter of feeling. And I feel like Jenn's piece was the final sort of placement to bring this village into motion. And with its sound in the background, telling stories, talking to Fabiola about the hot comb and transporting people. And you may not know what that is, but you can look at it and you can see, and you can read about it, and you can have the experience with us. We all become the village. And that's how we make change, and that's how we find equity. That's how we find a future, which is in our space as well. So, you know, I just said a bunch of rambling words. I don't even know if I answered a question. This is what I do for a living, ladies and gentlemen, the Afrofuturist Period Room.
Thank you so much, all three of you. It's been amazing. It's just been incredible. And welcome again. The room will be open until noon. Our amazing press team is here. We'll remain here for any follow-up questions. The room itself will open to the public on Friday, November 5th, and will stay on view for the next 2 years plus. So revisit it again, look for maybe something changing in the future, and thanks again.
Ready? Yes. You talk about bringing emotion to this exhibition, and you are known for such iconic work, like Black Panther. What do you hope that when people see this, what emotion do you want them to take from it?
You know, many. Many. I want there to be joy and laughter, quiet moments, wondering, confusion, right? Because not everybody's going to understand right off the bat. I think that this is a room that allows for someone to be human. And in being human, you have all kinds of emotions that sometimes we're told we're not supposed to have. Someone could be angry. The one thing I don't want people to feel is indifferent, because that's means nothing, right? That means there's a nothing. So any emotion, because that means that someone reacted to it. Someone had a feeling about it. You know, we often think like it's such a bad thing for someone not to like it or someone to hate it. It's still an emotion. You still had to react. Something had to make you go there. right? So I think the emotions vary and are many, because when I walk through it, I have all of these different emotions. I go from, wanting to cry to laughing, and just a few times screaming at the top of my lungs when I first started seeing the installation go in. So, I want someone to walk through that and walk away maybe knowing themselves a little bit better.
Thank you. I guess I will ask you just talk about the project. What is the most impressive thing in the project for you?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. At one point, I suggested that there was one item in the show that was my favorite, but it really is just how all of the items speak to one another. I think that the room very much sort of centers the history of Seneca Village, but it's the way that the items speak to each other. There's a feeling in that space, a spiritual feeling, one that should be revered. I just love that we have been able to sort of reclaim that history and think about future possibilities even after a place like Seneca Village and so many other instances of Black communities being raised, that there can be some life after it, and that speculation is a sort of theory that one could live under and continue to thrive even under global anti-Blackness.
Okay. Given what has been going on in the country, I actually around the world, right, with the Black Lives Matter, and given the iconic status of the museum, how significant is this to take place at the Met Museum? If you can talk about that.
Yeah, I think that centering Black history in this way is groundbreaking in a place like the Met. I think that even within this particular country and the debates over history, how we should teach history, and so forth that are going on in various communities across the country, this room actually shows us that history is not something that's fixed in a particular moment, that the things that occurred in various at various moments throughout our history have an impact on our contemporary moment, and we have to deal with them, or else we're going to repeat some of that very sordid, barbaric, and unfortunate history that has come before us.
What would you like people that come to see this, what would you like them to take from this exhibition?
I think what I would like them to take away is the sense that as you walk around your town or your city, wherever it is you live, there is a history under your feet. Like literally, if you were to dig into the ground, you will have artifacts that exist that tells you about previous lives. And I hope that people will take away the sense of wanting to learn more about places like Seneca Village, and that they understand more about why it's so central that we understand our history, and we think about how that history can inform our present and give us some lessons for how to move forward in more democratic and hopeful and amazing ways.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Talk about the project that you have in the exhibition. If you can talk about it too, please.
Yeah. I think there's right now two of the pieces. The chandelier, it's called furnished, and then the Orion table. What can I say? They come from a canon of work that I call the artifacts for the children of the diaspora. It's about a new mythology that expresses some of the ideals, things that I learned from growing up, having my Nigerian grandmothers in the house directly from the village, and things that you don't necessarily learn as part of the diaspora unless you have the privilege and the advantage to have a connection to our homeland. And I felt like it's a responsibility of mine as an artist to create objects that help to continue that spirit, hopefully for the rest of the children of the diaspora. So I'm very proud to have those pieces inside the show.
Oh, you just talk about your heritage, Nigeria.
Yes.
Have you been there recently?
I'm actually going in February to Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal.
So what do you think about the focus now on African arts in general? There's more interest in artists from Africa and also from the diaspora. So what do you think about that? If you can the interest?
I don't really think about it that much. I think
do you think it's a good? Do you think it's a good thing? There's been more interest, but there are people that are very concerned about some of the artifacts that you talk about that it should be returned back to Africa rather than be at a museum like this or in other foreign museums. Do you have any thought about that?
I think that the pieces that are, I do think that pieces that were stolen from Africa should be returned to the places that they were stolen from.
Okay. Thank you.
That's quite simple.